Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another Java tutorial in our Java tutorial series, and in this tutorial we are going to be covering the concept of generics. Now, what is generics and why would you use it? Well, generics is a concept where you can essentially create a class or a method that can take in or utilize any type of data that you want and use it in a generic manner without having to make duplicate methods, just working with a different data type and doing the same operations. If they're doing different operations depending on the data, you're better off overloading it. But if you're doing the same sort of operation with different data types, you're better off creating a generic method or a generic class, I should say, in any given case. So, all right. Now, to demonstrate generics, we are going to utilize generics in methods where we're going to allow any type, right? Any type, and then we're going to make one where the data type has to fit a certain criteria. And that's another thing that these things are good for. So, in order to do this, we're going to utilize a method. Like, we're going to create a method that takes in an array of any type and will loop through. Right? It'll loop through any of. It'll basically go and loop through all of the different elements in the array and print them to the console. We're going to make this a multi-dimensional array to make this a little bit more interesting, but just know this will work with normal arrays as well. Just modify it to work with the normal arrays. You should know how to do that. All right, so let's go ahead then, and we'll say public static, and then here we define the generic type. Excuse me. So in this case, we'll say opening angle bracket, and inside of that we put a T. T stands for type, and then we go ahead and say void. So the return type, we'll say print array, and then in the parameter list, we also want T, and then this will be a multi-dimensional array like that, and we'll call it array. And so with that, we just made our first generic method. Now, if we hover over the signature, we can see what it would show in our documentation. This is basically telling us that void main dot print array, which is our method here, takes in a generic array, multi-dimensional array of any type called array, and it returns void. So nothing happens. It doesn't return anything. Now, to loop through multi-dimensional arrays, as I've told you to go out and figure out, you go ahead and say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than array dot length I plus plus. We do the same for each array inside of this array. So for int j is equal to 0, I is less than array I at index I dot length I plus plus, or rather j plus plus. And then the other I here, as we've put it, should be a j. Now, we can open this up. Just like that. No errors. And then we will say then we'll go ahead and say if we'll say if j, right? If j is less than whatever array is at index I dot length minus 1, and then we can also have an else. If it is, we'll say system out print j with a new line. However, if it isn't, let's say system dot out dot print j, let's see, yeah, j plus a space. Okay, so we have that now. So now what it'll do is when it gets to the end of that array, it'll go to a new line, loop through again, you gotta do the same stuff over and over again. So we have that. That's how we work with our generic data in our array here. Now, let's go ahead and use this. So we'll say we want an integer array, right? So int multi-dimensional array called multidim ints, set that equal to an array, and then have and then we'll have some arrays inside of that. Where, okay, we'll have 9 of them. We'll have 9 bits of data. Just like that. And we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, And it just goes on and on, you know, like it should. So 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. Just like that. Pretty cool, pretty cool. We got all that worked out. So we have our array now. And with that being said, we can now go ahead and say print array and then pass it multidim ints. And we're not going to get any, well, we do get an error. Let's see what that's about. We get the method print array in the type main is not applicable for the argument int da da da. Okay. Well, that's fine. It has to be an object, which is okay. So we'll say integer. There we go. All right. So we have this now. A nice multi-dimensional array of integers, and then our call is also no longer error-ridden. So let's go ahead now and run it. And it looks like there was an issue with how we handled it. And we'll say if that is the case, then go ahead. All right, there we go. So it looks like it doesn't change or anything like that. It just keeps going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I guess we didn't reference the index, which is fine, I suppose. So array of I, so whatever the current array is that we're in, and we also want to refer to its index of j, because right now we're referring to the index, and that's not what we want. We want that. There we go. Now let's try it. And there we go. We get all the way up to 45. Pretty neat, right? I tend to believe that it is. Now, of course, you can also do this with characters. You can do this with any kind of data type. So let's go ahead and say character say chars. And we'll do the entire alphabet, right? Which is pretty nice. Okay, so we have our array cleared out. We'll say A, B, C, and D. E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. All right. So now we have that all squared away. Let's go ahead then and execute the code there. And we get an exception. So we can say, oh, that's right, we forgot to change the name of our array that we want to reference. So there we go. Now go ahead and try it. You can see we now get A, B, C, D, all the way down to Z. The exact way we expected to. So that is how you basically accept any data type whatsoever. Now, how would you go about creating a method, a generic method, that would accept only specific variable types? So let's say only specific types that can be compared. So like they extend from the class comparable. Well, go ahead and say public static T, right? So T, and after T we say extends comparable. This also needs a generic, so go ahead and put that there, so where we have that. Void, or rather Boolean, is same value, and we need a T, A, and then T of B. So T called, the object is going to be called B. All right, so here we are. Now, of course, we get an error. What is this error going to be? This method must return a result of type Boolean. So we haven't returned anything yet. We'll say return true just to get it to be quiet. So now we have a generic method called isSameValue, where it takes in two objects A and B, and it's going to compare them. And these values that it takes in have to extend from comparable. So they have to have, like, for example, a compare to method. So we'll say if A dot compare to, and then we take in, then we'll put B in there. Now, it's important to understand what this method does if we're going to implement this properly. So, what compare to does is it basically compares the object that it's being called from with the specified object that you pass it. And it will return a negative integer 0 or a positive integer as this object is less than, equal to, or greater than the specified object. Right. So what will happen here then? All right. So we can scroll down to the documentation if I can find my cursor. Scroll down the documentation. It returns a negative integer 0 or a positive integer. So let's say we say compare to B. Now, I suppose what we could do is, what we can do for now is we'll say void, and we'll kind of experiment. We'll see what compare to will return if they are the same. Right? So we'll say system out print line A compare to B. All right, so we can do that. And in our main method, we'll say integer I1 is equal to 10. All right. And we'll say is same value. And we'll pass in I1 and I1. So go ahead then and do that. Save it. And then run it. You can see we get 0. That means they are the same. Now, what happens if we copy this and store them in different objects, but they have the same, they have the same value? Well, I2 go ahead and save it and run it. You can see we still get 0. That's because they are still the same value. And if we say 11, and then we try to run it, we get -1. Because 11 and 10 are not the same thing. Right? So let's look at this one more time. Save this and run it. We get 0 when they're both 10 because they go off of what the values are. But if you change the values to different values, you get -1. So we'll say if a dot we'll say return a dot compare to b. We'll say if it's less than 0, then it's false. Otherwise, it'll be true. Right? And so we can change this void to a Boolean. And that's how you do it. You can save it and run it on your own, but I'm running out of time for this tutorial that I have allotted. But that is basically how you implement generic methods where you accept any type, and how you implement generic methods where you can accept any type given a certain class that it extends to still make it generic, but limit it to certain data types. So that basically does it, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we'll see you all in the next one. See ya.